Here at the City of Port Phillip, we collect over 20,000 tonnes of landfill waste from households within the city each year. A lot of that waste is food waste, around 35% of it, and that can easily be reduced by composting and worm farming. What we've shown here at the City of Port Phillip at our head office here at the Town Hall is that waste can easily be quickly sorted out by using worm farms, and it's really quick, it's really easy, it's really efficient. It's no fuss and no smell. We encourage residents to take up both worm farming and composting to reduce the landfill leaving our city. It's a simple way to make a big difference. One of the most important things about worm farming, Matt, is to get good quality food and get it as separate as possible before it actually gets to the worm farms. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to provide different kinds of bins to allow people to separate their waste.
Yep.
And you will have seen bin systems like this before?
Yes, yep.
And be familiar with some of the colours?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think we've got yellow is usually mixed recyclables.
That's correct.
Red for landfill,
Yep.
avoid.
Yep.
And organic waste in the green.
Yeah, and what we do to further differentiate the green bin is it's not just organic food.
Mm-hmm.
So because worms have, remember the diet we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Worms have a specific diet. So what we like to call it is worm organics.
Yep.
So we take bins like this green one here, and what we do is we put another little sign on it saying, you know, don't put onions and don't put citrus and all the other things. Just what we want is in here is worm organics.
Yep.
And so if we put these systems in the various places that people gather to separate their waste, and this can be in your home kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
This could be just a little bucket.
I've got something similar at home.
Yeah, me too. So this is all you need, a way to separate, whether it's a little can, a bucket, or you know, a more sort of advanced and colour-coded system like this. And this really, really helps to separate the waste and makes it easier once it gets down to here to feed the worms in an efficient manner. Yeah. So what we have here on the table is a selection of pre-prepared food items that regularly come through this process here. The first part though is when we get the bags from the bins upstairs, and I'll get one of those now. So we can see exactly how this stuff comes from upstairs, and what we really want to show people today, and I guess get you involved in, is well, what can the worms eat and what don't they eat?
Yep.
A lot of people get confused about what can worms eat and what can't they eat. And what you see in here is a whole range of different things that are both good for worms and not so good for worms. So you can see some of this stuff here, Matt. You can see that,
Yep.
yeah, what is this? A plastic bag's being placed in with something else in it. Maybe there's something organic in the middle here, and you see here,
Yep.
an apple wrapped in a serviette. So what I've got here at the front, Matt, you'll see this is food and paper scraps and even eggshells that, and I'll talk about the eggshell in a minute, but food and paper scraps that are ready to go straight into the worm farm. This bag here is things that are good to go in a worm farm, but you can see there it's a whole banana.
Yep.
And so what I would do with a whole banana is break open the skin, squash it, so get it ready for the worm farm. And worms, this is a whole apple. A worm just can't do anything with that. And what happens with that in the worm farm is it starts to rot from the centre out.
Okay.
And then that causes other problems, which attracts insects, and then that causes other problems. So what we do with apples is we cut them up, and all these other big things, big apple cores like this is just too big to go in a worm farm. So if you want your worm farm to be successful, what you want to do is these kind of things you can either break or just cut up with a knife before they go into the worm farm.
Okay.
So can you show us through this bag here is some of the things that were picked out yesterday from these kind of bags that came from upstairs that can't go in worm farms. So what things have you got there in front of you?
Okay, so we have avocado pips, which obviously they're going to be too woody and fibrous for a worm to get through. Now we have citrus, which worms aren't really big fans of citrus, I believe.
No. It'll just sit in the worm farm forever. I'll steer clear of it.
Okay, this one surprised me because I thought bananas were okay. So what's...
So bananas are okay, but when you get that little waxy bit on the end, that'll just sit in the worm farm forever too. So tear that off before it gets into the bin system, before it gets into the worm farm.
Sure.
Best to take it out.
Okay, we got some grape sticks here, grape stalks.
Yeah, so a hard and woody thing. Anything hard and woody will just stay in the worm farm for the life of the worm farm.
And I guess that covers sticks too.
Yeah.
No good.
Sticks, no good. Keep the sticks out. Or cut flowers, cut plants, keep them out.
Yep. I noticed you had tea bags in one of the other bags, but this one...
And what we're seeing increasingly come out from the offices upstairs is these cloth kind of tea bags. You know, I can't tear this one. It's made of some kind of material. And that'll just sit in the worm farm. It'll come right down the bottom and it'll end up in your garden with the castings. But we noticed this one, just a paper one, perfect. Yep. That's really good for worms. And what you also noticed, Matt, is this one hasn't got it, but the ones with the staples and the little piece of cardboard.
Yep.
So all that's fine too. The little tags, the little bit of metal, the little bit of string.
Yep.
All that can go in the worm farm.
We got some bread. Bread?
Bread, yes. So bread's a yeasty product. It'll ferment. No good for worms.
Okay, that's the same with that.
Pizza, and then no good.
We have little bits of quinoa and some sort of grain at the bottom here. Yeah, but I guess that's contaminated.
Yeah. So where we've got things like banana skin, which is a good thing, but it's contaminated by this other saucy mix, just no good. Any kind of, people put their lunches in here, rice mixes and curry mixes. They're no good for worms. So keep all that stuff out.
Okay. What about meat products?
No meat. So the worms are vegetarians. It's strict vegans almost. No dairy, no pasta, no bread, no meat.
Yep. Someone thought the worms were going to enjoy a nice tasty
plastic
sandwich bag.
No, thank you. And
not for them.
More plastic. No, thank you.
Okay.
Citrus. No, thank you. What else we got in here? More plastic. No, thank you. Plastic. So, and winter comes around, we always notice, Matt, that lots more citrus comes down because the oranges come into season, so lots of citrus comes through, but essentially someone has to go through all of this by hand and get rid of all of that stuff so that it doesn't go in the worm farm. You can't just grab this bag and tip it straight in the worm farm.
Yep.
Because you'll just get all these bits of stuff that the worms won't ever touch.
So how many people's food waste are we managing down here with the worm farms?
Around 600 people.
Wow. It's impressive.
These farms here will look after the lunch sort of morning afternoon tea of 600 people.
Wow.
So it's pretty impressive what the worms do. We might just put that aside just for a second. And we'll talk about the newspaper. So worms really love newspaper if they can't get anything else. Obviously they'd rather not eat paper, there's better preferences, but newspaper's good. The thing I wanted to differentiate between is these glossy magazines, Matt.
Okay.
So avoid the glossy magazines. Don't put magazines into the worm farm, just newspaper's good. And that's different from, say, copy paper. Never put whole sheets of copy paper in a worm farm. Okay. Shredded is okay, but with these worm farms down here, what I do is I avoid shredded paper, and the reason why I avoid it is because people shred everything. They shred bits of plastic, they shred, you name it.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is maybe not in amongst this bit, but in amongst all of the shredded paper that I put in these worm farms, it's always contaminated the farms because people will run laminated sheets through the worm farms, and it's just really, really problematic. I'll do the eggshell part now. Eggshells by themselves are pretty good in a worm farm, but the problem is, if you know when you're peeling an egg and sometimes you get the bits of white still on there.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a protein, and we don't want any protein in the worm farm. So I tend to avoid eggshells, but if you're really good at peeling them and you squash them up, they're really good for the worm farm. The worms don't eat it, but it's good for the health of the soil.
Okay.
So eggshells are okay. And as we said before with the apple, so with an apple like this, I just cut it in a whole lot of little bits. As I said, if it's just a big hunk, what'll happen is it'll stay in the worm farm.
Quite revealing for you to see what people throw away as well. That someone would throw away a whole apple just with one bite taken out.
There's heaps of stuff in the worm farms that is still edible. So, you know, just chop all this stuff up. As I said, with just the apple cores, just break them up a bit. This is a leek. This is the offshoots of a leek. Normally you'd avoid onion stuff. Little bits and pieces of it are okay, but you wouldn't make it a dominant thing. So worms don't like anything from this sort of family: the onions, leek, garlic, capsicum, chili.
Yep. So sounds like my son.
Yeah, yeah. So your son might be a little bit like a worm.
A bit wormy.
That's not a bad thing. Worms are pretty good. The one last thing I wanted to show you, Matt, is coffee grounds. Now, these coffee grounds come from a nearby coffee shop. Okay, and this is probably a 5 kilo bag of coffee grounds. And I have been doing some experiments with putting raw coffee grounds, like fresh used coffee grounds, in the worm farms, but it's too overpowering. I think it's actually too high in nitrogen, and so it's too strong. What you can do with coffee grounds, if you've got a small, or you're just in your home and you've got a small bit, put a small bit in, but don't ever put the whole bag in there. That'll turn your worm farm into a toxic sort of dump.
Don't want that.
What you can do with coffee grounds is compost them for a period of, say, 4 to 6 months, and then the worms will just love it. They'll just love it. So just wrap all that up. We hand sort all of the food. Okay, we separate it all. We cut it into small bits. Sometimes we add a little bit of coffee. Worms love newspaper, don't love glossy, and steer clear of the shredded stuff. The key thing, Matt, is quality in, quality out, and that's what this is all about.
Brett, I wanted to pick your brains about some of the common problems that people experience with worm farms.
Yeah, good question, Matt. So the most common problem, I'll show you in this worm farm here, Matt, as I said in one of the other videos, that trust your senses, and your senses will come alive to what's in the worm farm, and you start to feel. So immediately I've picked up this part of the worm farm, and I can feel the temperature of the soil, I can feel how it feels, I can see and feel the texture, I can smell it, and if you have a smell there, this is one of the greatest indicators of something wrong in the worm farm, the smell. If the smell is not earthy and natural, there's something going wrong in your worm farm. And one of the biggest problems that I see in worm farms all over the place is that people overfeed. Because they've gone to all this trouble to collect all of the scraps from their kitchen, and they don't want to throw it out to landfill, but they put it in here. And the worst thing you can do is put too much food in here, because what happens is it starts to rot. And once it starts to rot, all those little bugs start to smell that rot. And what they want to come in and breed here. So that's why they come here. They start to smell that smell, and you'll smell it if you see an overfed worm farm. This worm farm is just so healthy. We can't see any real problems. In this back corner, perhaps, it's just really good. But sometimes you see a little bit of slime build up. So, and the slime build up is just because there's too much vegetable content in there. And if that kind of situation arises, what you need to do is more of the paper, the carbon, or grass clippings, you know, those kind of things that have a greater carbon content than nitrogen. It's just got the mix wrong. If you ever see slimy build up, back off the food, put more carbon
But it is fixable. You don't have to throw it all out and start again.
And what I try not to do is disturb the worms too much, and I am doing a bit of disturbing today, but sometimes what can happen is when these layers build up, what you'll do is you'll trap the air from getting in. And so you've got to imagine this could be out in the forest or out in a paddock, or wherever. So there'll be a bit of air circulating. So I don't do this very often, but a little bit of aerating the soil, and I try to be as gentle as I possibly can. So a little bit of air, and usually what most worm farms need is more carbon and less food. Less vegetable matter, the nitrogen side of things.
And when you mention the temperature, I guess you don't want anything too hot?
No, that's we've got all these farms here in a it's a sort of almost underground car park, but it's shielded. They must be in the shade. You cannot have a worm farm in the sun. It'll just get too hot. Worms start cooking at 32 degrees Celsius. So that's the death zone for worms. In summer on 40 degree days, what we'd like to do is put ice in here. So one of those frozen soft drink bottles, we'll just come in here, we'll dig out a bit of the center, and I'll be very gentle here. Just dig out a bit of the center and we'll put the bottle there, just a frozen bottle of ice, and the worms will sort of love that and will keep them cool for the day.
What about in the real colder nights as well? Do you have to accommodate to that?
The cold nights in Melbourne are usually not cold because there's a lot of thermal energy in this big mass of soil here, so it'll hold its temperature pretty well. It's more the heat that's of a concern. The worms will go a little bit dormant in winter when it gets sort of in the middle of the year, and they'll consume less food. So if it's winter, sometimes you just need to back off on the food. But just pay attention with those senses, the nose, the eyes and the ears and the feel. And you'll have a successful worm farm if you just pay attention to those basic things. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that.
Keep it pretty simple.
Fantastic.
Yeah, pleasure.